Welcome to AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. Educate. Celebrate. Connect. Arizona Hispanic Connection.
One of my mottos in life has always been, I've never wanted to be popular. No, never popular. I wanted to be respected. Because if you're respected, you're part of the community. Now, my father was respected. Francisco Castro was of Basque and Mexican origin, 6 foot 4 inches tall, 240 pounds. Husky, not fat. He was a pearl diver from a fishing village on the tip of Baja California, a place called San Jose del Cabo. But he never went to school. No, he never went to school. Now, my mother was respected as well. Rosario Acosta was small, but tough, very tough. She was from a village up the coast from where my father was born, a pueblito called Santa Rosalia. And they say that's where they fell in love. Now, me, I was born in Cananea, Sonora, not too far from here. My family moved there when I was just 2, on June the 12th, 1916. It was during the Mexican Revolution in the days of Pancho Villa and Zapata and Madero. And the family had come to Cananea because my father heard that there was work in the mines. Cananea was a company town. Papa worked for the smelter, Cananea Consolidated Copper Company. The pay wasn't too bad, but the conditions were terrible. So we joined the union, Sindicato 65, Union number 65. And because my father always spoke his mind, he soon became a leader. The respect of his compañeros in the union only earned my father the company's disdain. And naturally, they labeled him a rabble-rouser and had him thrown in prison. My mother worried that he would be hanged. Back then, troublemakers were hanged all the time. But Francisco Castro was not hanged that day. Instead, my mother, by the sheer force of her spirit, managed to convince the authorities to release him by promising that we would leave not only Cananea, but our beloved Mexico también. So, that's what we did. We crossed the border in Naco in 1918. I was only 2 at the time, so I don't remember much about that day. But as the story goes, here was this young man with his wife and 11 children coming to a new country. And as we crossed, the immigration inspector told my father, Castro family, you're in the United States of America now. The rest is up to you. He was right. That's the way we wanted it. That's what America's all about. Now, my father found work right away at Phelps Dodge in Douglas. We lived in nearby Pirtleville. It was the Mexican town set up for the smelter. And like me, Arizona was very young in those days. I remember the day Governor George W.P. Hunt came to town. He was the state's first governor. The newspapers called him the Old Walrus because he was big and fat, very fat, and bald, and he had a thick mustache and glasses. And the governor had come to Douglas to celebrate the 4th of July, and as soon as we all heard, me and the boys hurried down to the 10th Street Park. This was the special occasion. Not because of him, we didn't know who the hell he was. It was because there was free hot dogs and soda pop. And pobre mexicanos that we were, all we ever ate was frijoles and arroz, a veces un poco de pollo, marrano. To us, a hot dog was a delicacy. A Coca-Cola? Like champagne. As soon as we got down to the park, we plopped down on the grass right next to the stage, and after a lot of boring jibber-jabber by the chief of police and the sheriff and a lot of muckety-mucks, the governor got going on his speech. In ours, the great state of Arizona, while the opportunities are boundless, on this vast landscape, why, any man can find his fortune. To succeed, he only need have grit, will, and determination. Arizona is a place where any man can excel. While ladies, one day, ladies and gentlemen, even one of these little barefooted Mexican boys could be our governor. He was pointing at me. But knowing how politicians can be, I don't think he meant a word he said. But as we know, those words turned out to be prophecy. And that's not the end of the story.
Thank you. Wow. That was James Garcia. Welcome. This is David Parra with Alex Juarez here. This is AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. We have a treat for you. We have a special program, the life, work, and legacy of Raul H. Castro. How do you feel, Alex?
Good morning, David. Good morning, everyone listening to us. You're listening to 1190 AM. And those of you watching on Facebook Live, on AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. It is a beautiful morning in Arizona. Glad you're here with us today. For those that are interested in calling and wanting to maybe ask a question to our experts today, please call 602-759-1910. Again, 602-759-1910. Today's a very special day, David. We are talking about our ex-governor, Raul H. Castro. And one day did happen. It happened, and it can happen again.
Right. We have special guests with us today. We're going to do our very best to do a little bit of justice to the best of our ability to remember and honor the memory and honor the family of Raul H. Castro. I mean, I've been for the past 2 weeks preparing for this show, and it is unbelievable. Of course, I did not have to do this because we have James Garcia. Every person I spoke to this few days told me, you got to have James Garcia on the show. And I said, I know that.
Embodiment of the governor.
Right.
Un poco más chaparro.
So, we have several guests on the phone. We're going to go to the phone first because we have Beth Castro, who is the daughter to Raul. And we want to, first of all, say hi. Beth, if you can say hi to the audience in just a few words preliminarily at the beginning of this show. Go ahead.
Oh, good morning, you all. And James, great job, as usual. I call him St. James because he's always been there for me and seriously helped me so much prepare for my father's funeral and memorial services. So I will always be indebted to you, James. You're like my surrogate husband.
Thank you. My wife will love that. Yeah.
Well, I said you used to be. I don't say you are anymore because I haven't seen you in a long time. But anyway, you guys, it's so nice. I really appreciate what you're doing. Talking about my father this morning, and actually June 12th. It would have been my father's 101st birthday, and I'm going to be going down to Douglas on Thursday because I want to see his port of entry once again. I want to go by his park that they named after him. I want to meet with the mayor and kind of just take a little tour, do a little melancholy tour about my father. I'm just trying to keep my father's spirit and memory alive all through the state. So I appreciate you guys' help. And I did mail you some pictures. I don't know if you have them yet. Hopefully in the next couple days you can post them, on your website.
Yeah. Hi, Beth. This is Alex, and thank you for joining us. Thank you so much. It's really an honor to have you on the show, and also have Nacho Castro, which was a nephew of Governor Castro. But Beth, when you go to Douglas, can you take a couple more pictures, please, and make sure that you send them to us so we can post them on the Facebook page?
I would love to. I definitely will do that. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you.
Nacho's on the phone. Nacho,
yes.
He's great.
Yes.
He does a lot of speeches for my father. He's I think probably the only other Castro that will be ready for politics. So should be. Very proud of you, Nacho. You had a great family, and his daughter is going to graduate this year at U of A with honors at the age of 50. And there's a lot of inspiring Castro stories that I think happened because of my father and his influence.
Yes, definitely. So, Beth, thank you so much, and you will remain on the phone for the whole hour, so we'll keep coming back to you. Now we would like to greet and introduce Nacho Castro. He is a nephew of Raul H. Castro. Are you there, Nacho? And if so, please say a few words just at the beginning of the show. Go ahead.
Good morning, David, and good morning, Beth. I am proud to be on the air with you guys, talking about my tío, and I'll answer any questions you want to know. He was an inspiration to me, and I was fortunate that I got to know him better as older, as an adult, driving him around the state of Arizona. Got to learn a lot about his politics. Got to learn a lot some of the family that I didn't know about, that I knew almost, but got verified because my dad was kind of a historian of the Castro family.
Right.
So, willing to answer any of your questions.
Yeah, thank you, Nacho. And you and I spoke over the phone. I'll be driving to whatever you are because I want to get everything that you have to share on video and share it with Arizona or Hispanics from Arizona and actually from the whole world through internet. Please stay on the line. We'll keep coming back to both of you. Now we're going to go to Tío Tachias. Am I pronouncing your name right?
Yes, you are.
Tío Tachias. And we want to, first of all, thank you for coming. And we are asking also to share a few words at the beginning, and then we'll just develop the conversation. Go right ahead.
Well, the first I ever heard about Raul Castro was a teacher, my sixth grade teacher, Ernesto Castro, who was a brother. And he used to tell us about his brother, talking about Raul. And it stuck to our minds that this man was going to become something in the history of Arizona. And as it turned out, he did. He became, I think he became county attorney for Pima County, which was really an exciting point in our lifetimes. And then he became the judge, and from there he went on to become governor. I got involved with him early on, even before he was governor. We invited him to Flagstaff because we had an organization, and one of the chapters of this organization was in Flagstaff. It was called the American Coordinating Council on Political Education, and he was involved along with Jean Marin and people from all over the state. There were about 16 chapters in the state at that time, and he came up and gave a speech at the Hotel Montevista in Flagstaff. That's it. Originally, my contacts with him. Later on, I was very much involved in his campaigns for governor.
Right.
Just wanted to say, for those folks on radio and watching Facebook Live, we are very grateful that Tío Tachias is here. I've had a pleasure of knowing Tío Tachias for many years, but Tío is an icon in the community in Arizona. I've considered him a mentor for many years, along with many other folks in here. Worked with him closely at the Arizona Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, but he has helped me develop and hopefully into half the man that he's been and leader in the community. So I want to thank Tío for being here today. And we have experts like James and Tío that have known Governor Castro over the years, but he spent time with him in campaign. So we're very lucky to have him here today, giving us his insight on how Governor Castro had his thought process, why he made his decisions, careers, etc. So we're very lucky to have him here today.
Thank you. I want the audience to know that I found about 25 videos in YouTube, and I created a playlist. So if you go to our YouTube channel, which has the same name, you would just go to YouTube, youtube.com, and find AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. You look for our channel, and you will find a playlist that says Arizona Hispanic Leaders, Raul Castro. You click there, and you'll find some 25 videos, and we're going to look for more. So, James, before we go on break, you have a special guest with you. Would you introduce her?
Yes, I'm glad. So this is Sonia Rodriguez. Sonia is actually playing the mom of the parents in a play that I have coming out June 23rd. It's called 1070. It's a family drama. It runs June 23rd through July 9th at the Herberger Theater Center. It's a brand new play, and she's one of the actresses, and she's here today helping me with some of the scenes from the Castro play that I did some years ago.
A few words?
It's nice to be here. This is something that I'm really glad I've actually gotten to know James, because I'm starting to get to know a lot of amazing people. I've actually lived in Arizona about 20 years. But I was born in Queens, New York, where all good Puerto Ricans come from.
Oh.
So it's taken a little while to get connected with the community. So this has been a fascinating opportunity, and what he's written here. I told him to start calling me La Llorona because in this play, he's such an amazing director and he knows how to get to you, but boy, he can bring a lot out of me, and he'll just look at everybody and goes, okay, I'm going to make her cry again.
He's an extremely talented man, not only a playwright, but extremely good actor as well. Very good businessman, communicator. I mean, I've learned a lot from James as well in communication. So thank you, James.
Thank you, Alex,
for all the work you've put in Arizona. Unfortunately, we have to go on break, and when we get back, we're going to pick up the conversation again of Raul H. Castro. You're listening to 1190 AM, AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection. We will be right back.
Welcome to AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection. Educate. Celebrate. Connect. Arizona Hispanic Connection.
Thank you. Thank you for staying with us. This is AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. You're listening to 1190 AM. If you would like to call in, the number is 602-759-1910. We are also on Facebook Live at AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. So please join us. We're going to pick up the conversation. And again, as I was kind of preparing for this show, which I was really touched by the life, the work, and the legacy of Raul H. Castro, and James and I had a conversation. We're just kind of going back and forth to the main points that we want to touch. I mean, Raul was an athlete. He was an educator. He was an attorney. He was a judge. He was a governor. He was an ambassador. He was pretty much everything. And we also, in our conversation here in the studio, he was born in 1916. The state of Arizona, Arizona became a state of the country in 1912, and he just passed away. Raul passed away at 2015. So this is a man who pretty much goes through the whole history to date of Arizona. Amazing, James. It is unbelievable. We have a section called in our platform, Arizona Hispanic Leaders. So this is our first, and we're going to be covering the shows on other leaders of the community as well. But we wanted to start with Raul. James, take us a little bit to what brought this family briefly to the United States.
Yeah, sure, of course. Now, for folks who were listening at the beginning, you heard a little monologue where he sort of describes this. But basically, his family story is that they moved from Baja at some point to Sonora to work in the mines. The father went to work in the mines. And this was in the early 1900s, probably after the 1910s. But, of course, there was a war that happened in 1910 called the Mexican Revolution, the Second Mexican Revolution. And so in the middle of that, at some point, his father, Francisco, was a Union leader, got in trouble with the authorities. They basically threw him in jail. He was probably going to be hanged at some point. And his wife convinced them to let him go on the condition that they left the country. So he took his entire family and crossed the border. Back then, it was a little easier to cross the border.
The wife was very wise.
Right. The wife was apparently an extremely tough, hard-nosed woman. She was famous. So they crossed the border with 11 children. Right, so this is not a small family. They crossed the border, and then the father actually dies relatively soon after that. And so most of the children were raised by the mom. Right. So he dies relatively young, and Governor Castro excels in school in Douglas. He becomes an athlete. He becomes a star football player. He gets a scholarship.
Right. Now let us go back just a little bit. I understand that. That there was a teacher, I believe it was Miss Wright, who was a key influence on Raul.
I have a scene in the play where we fictionalize this encounter with Mrs. Wright, and basically Mrs. Wright was one of these teachers who perceived pretty immediately that this was an extraordinary person, that this was not just an average student, and she basically told him that you can do better than you're doing, right? You're capable of more than you're doing right now in this class. And he took that to heart as a kind of challenge, and it became a turning point for him in his education. And education, by the way, was a theme for his entire life. I mean, literally, I met him when he was 92, and I was waiting at his home, and he pulled up in his Jeep. So he was still driving around at 92 in his Jeep. And he had come from delivering a presentation to like some school children about the importance of education. So it was the arc of his life.
And there is an anecdote that where they would go to school to Douglas. He was not living in Douglas.
Right.
When they would go to Douglas, he would see the bus with all I think he called them the I don't know if he says the white kids.
Yeah.
And they would wave at him and other.
Yeah, he grew up. The thing to remember is that most, if not at least half of his life, Governor Castro lived in a segregated world. Right? He was second or third class citizenry, and so even as a boy in school, he lived in Puertoville, which was the Mexican town built by the smelter. That's where all the Mexican workers lived, and he would have to walk 4 miles a day to school. And 4 miles back, and to not wear out his shoes, he literally took his shoes off, threw them over his shoulder, and carried them to school.
No, but it wasn't that there wasn't bus services. There was bus services.
No, there were bus services,
but they would not take
but
Mexican kids.
Kids did not get to ride the
Right.
bus.
So this is the kind of childhood he grew up in. And Theo, anybody, Beth, Nacho, at any time, just jump in the conversation. We don't see you, so you're going to have to help us, okay?
I have a question for Beth. I mean, given, Beth, that all the negativity and oppression that your dad lived through his life, what was his driving force? What made him succeed in life, and what drove him to that?
I think a lot of it had to do with apparently one of his teachers. Is that for many years when he was going through school, he kept being told that, he didn't need to learn a lot because Mexican kids were stupid and they'd be working in the coal mines anyway. And I know that one of his teachers, and James, you chime in there with her name, you remember, I don't.
This is right, yeah.
That literally said, you can be anything you want to be. You just need encouragement, being lazy, but you're very smart. And from that point on, he really started to excel because he found somebody that mentored him, which is what really drove him to move forward from that point.
So
right, James? Would you hear
No, absolutely. I mean, I think, again, and education became this driving force. I mean, he went to NAU, think about this, in the 30s as a Mexican-American in Arizona, in a state that was segregated, right? And went to NAU. Then it was called Arizona State Teachers College, and earned a teaching degree. But to speak to this legacy of discrimination, he earns his teaching degree and he goes back to Douglas thinking, I'm going to get a job as a teacher. And the first thing they tell him is, we don't hire Mexicans.
Yeah, let me go back just a little bit. Do you believe that the concept of the expectation, in other words, there was no expectation that Latinos would succeed, so why bother to go to school? I pick it up from this conversation that seemed to be predominantly there. Do you think that it's still today, not only from what we could call the educational system, but perhaps even with our own families, there's almost like an expectation of not going, with some, maybe not everyone?
I mean, I would say this. I think that Latino families overall understand clearly the value of education and how important it is to get you from this place to a better place, right? But I do think that there is generally in the system a kind of lower expectation of Latino students that is reflected by the lack of investment in their schools, right? This kind of sense that why spend a bunch of money in those districts?
And I hear that works in many different areas where there are poor communities, even for white children as well, though. I mean, I've heard a lot of success stories.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think, yeah. But I'm talking.
And also, the families got to push it too.
Well, the families, right?
My grandmother was one that was an advocate getting ahead, and she didn't believe in anybody sitting around. She had all boys except for one daughter, and all the boys had to do their share of work too.
Yeah.
And she was very adamant at work and school.
You're talking about Rosario Castro.
She was really, really a pusher.
Yeah.
She was a midwife in Douglas. She basically delivered most of the Mexican kids in Douglas, including myself. And she just was there And she never spoke English when we were around. I don't know whether she did or not, but she used to read the paper. She did speak French because she went to, when she was living in Santa Rosalia, which was run by a French company, and the schools were French. So she learned how to speak French.
Yeah.
And she was a tough woman.
And
And
she was a
allowed
midwife.
to call her grandma or nana or abuela. We had to call her Chalita.
Chalita.
And her thing is the sons worked and she worked too. And but she wanted everyone to get ahead. She had a sister that lived there. It lived in Douglas, and that's how they were arranged to be able to bring back from the United States. Her sister was married to a German that was expelled from Mexico during World War I. So when they came over, they had come over to the United States once before, where their daughter was born in Fairbanks, Arizona. And then when the revolution kind of come down, they went back to Mexico. They had their own business in Cananea. They had a bakery shop, and my grandpa worked at the mines, and that's where he was very active.
Right.
And so when they came back to the United States, he did start at a bakery shop and then worked sometime at the smelter, and then he passed away.
Right. So Raul's mother was a midwife. She was a partera, right?
See,
So I mean, it seems like she was pretty busy doing that almost full time.
Ernie, she was famous in that region. I mean, there are countless people that you will meet who say that she delivered my father.
what's that?
My mom.
Managed to get food was to they would take it out and trade with her being a midwife.
Oh, yes.
For
Yeah.
babies.
You know, it's like everywhere else. It was trade, food and money. And
Yeah.
they also had a cow in Puertoville, and I heard the story from my father that he got into trouble because the cow wasn't milking very good because he was riding the cow back and forth.
Now we're gonna be going on a short break. It's very interesting. I saw some of the pictures of Raul, and he was a handsome guy, eh? And he was an athlete. He was the quarterback of the university, and he was a boxer. He had a degree, but he couldn't find a job eventually. So we're gonna pick the story at that point. You're listening to 1190 AM. This is AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection, the life, work, and legacy of Raul H. Castro. We'll be right back.
Welcome to AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. Educate. Celebrate. Connect. Arizona Hispanic Connection.
I graduated law school in 1949. And like all graduates, I was faced with one question. How the heck am I going to make a living? Now, my first law office was at 199 North Church Street. It only had 2 rooms. In the front, I had a desk and a bookcase, and I bought at Army surplus that I filled with stacks and stacks of books. That way my clients would know that I was educated. The back room was my kitchen, and where I took a shower, and where I slept. Now, at the grand opening, my friend John Favor stopped by with a housewarming present, the old fraternity paddle we used on pledges. And I sanded it, and I stained it, and I carved my name in gold leaf. Raul H. Castro, attorney at law. I started off getting paid in food and such. One lady paid me with tortillas, another with tamales, which was okay because I was young and single and always hungry. One senora brought me a live chicken in a basket, but it got loose and started jumping around and squawking, and feathers were flying all over the place. What a mess. After a while, I started to make a good living and a good name for myself. The community got to know me, so in 1954, I ran for office. That was a very big year. I made history. I was elected the first Hispanic Pima County attorney.
And
And?
we got married.
Oh, right. We got married. Pat, tell them how we met.
See how they talk to you? Here's how it happened. My father was a banker in Milwaukee. After he died, the doctors told my mother, who had emphysema, to move to Tucson. You know, for her health. Soon after, I married an Air Force lieutenant, but he was killed in Korea, leaving me with my 2 girls, Beth and Mary. There I was, no job, no husband, so I went to work at the post office as the assistant postmaster. I gotta tell you, in those days, not a lot of women had a job like that. Later, I worked as a bailiff, then deputy U.S. Marshal. Let me tell you, not a lot of women had jobs like that in those days either. I even worked as the first female detective in the Pima County Sheriff's Office. That's where I met Raul. At the time, he was a deputy county attorney. I didn't really know who he was until one day.
I used to go to Litt's drugstore now and then in the morning to buy coffee. One day, I'm sitting at the counter at my usual spot when I noticed this beautiful blonde with a badge.
I didn't notice him at all.
From that day, I was a regular.
I eventually noticed him because as time went on, I could see he was moving closer and closer to me. Frankly, I was a little worried he might be a pervert.
Finally, I found myself sitting right next to her.
He said,
Hello.
"Hello. I hope you're not a pervert."
A pervert? Oh my gosh, no.
I'm just asking.
I'm a lawyer.
I guess that should have been my first question.
Thank you. So this is part of a play, James, that when was this play done and is it available? I know in those 25 videos that I mentioned that I capture, there's one of about 7 minutes. How big is the play?
It's a play called American Dreamer.
American Dreamer.
The Life and Times of Raul H. Castro. It's a full-length play. It's a 2-hour play.
Wow.
And it's been performed several times in the state. Once up in Flagstaff.
Is that in
it's
DVD somewhere?
It is not. It is not. But there are plans to record the whole thing as a teleplay.
Okay.
And work with the PBS station here. That's the long-term goal.
Great. Thank you.
But I should mention why it's called American Dreamer. Originally it had a different name, which I forget now, as I was writing it. But I settled on American Dreamer because, to me, Castro was sort of the original dreamer.
Yes.
We talk about dreamers these days, the young undocumented people who come and then flourish and are doing well. And he came undocumented. I mean, that's the thing. And he eventually succeeded and had an extraordinary life.
Yeah.
And James, Beth, Nacho, and Dio, one of the things that resonates as I read his biography and the history of Raul H. Castro is that he never used that oppression that he received in those times as an excuse. He would say, absolutely not.
I have one. This was told by my father. He said that when they were here in the United States, they got here, he got all the boys together, and he told them, we're in the United States now, and you got to start thinking like an Americano, not a Mexicano, and move forward.
Yeah, thank you, Nacho. You know, I have some notes here. He refused to be restrained by limitations.
Yeah.
Adversity was his angel. Isn't there a book, James?
There is a book people should know about. It's a small book that was co-written with Jack August, who since passed away. But it's a very good read. I mean, it gives you a sort of an overview on his life. And it was called Adversity is My Angel because he believed that.
Right. Adversity was his angel. That's the name of the book. And then don't complain. Do something about it. Create change. I also have some notes here that when he was in what is now NAU, right? Because you said it was the Arizona State Teachers College in Flagstaff. He was the varsity quarterback at the university, and he thought, I am the king of the campus. After graduating as teacher, he thought, I'm a big shot now. But no one would hire him simply because he was Mexican. We don't hire Mexicans to be teachers, he was told.
Yeah, well, he talked a lot about those experiences, and the factors in his early life are incredible when you consider the large family, the circumstances that they left Mexico under. He was always talking to young people about education, And even though he never really used his upbringing and the hardships that they went through to make a point, every now and then he would say, some of us had worse conditions than all of you in the audience, young kids, and some of us made it through there. So you have better circumstances than we did, and give it all you got. Give it all you got.
And that's 100% related to education, definitely.
Yeah, every time, every opportunity, it seemed like every opportunity where there were young children in the audience, he would bring up education.
Yeah.
All the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have a few minutes before we go on our last break, Theo, but can you, let's start with Theo, but anyone can jump in the conversation. Help us understand the background and the circumstances that allowed for him to be elected the governor of Arizona, the 14th, James, the 14th governor of Arizona.
I'll let Theo take
if you can help us understand kind of like the background and the circumstances that were happening in those days.
Well, the big moment was when he first got elected Pima County Attorney. That's what started him off. That was probably as important at the point in time when he got elected governor, because there had never been I don't think there had ever been a county attorney in the 14 counties then in Arizona. So he really broke the mold there, and from there he went on to become a judge, Superior Court judge. Then
Which was also an elected position.
Yeah, he was elected to 3 different positions, and he ran around in a circle of attorneys that really came to help him get started at the governorship level. Dennis DeConcini, Tom Chandler, and other real heavy duty.
And Dennis, who became a U.S. Senator.
Yeah, he became a U.S. Senator. So he was very different, because he was so well educated, and because he had this lifetime of so many experiences. At one time, he described himself as a hobo. When he used to ride the trains.
Right. When he couldn't find a job as a teacher, he literally went to Oklahoma and started working in the fields and boxing.
Yeah, think about the challenges he faced before he ran for governor, which is a challenge, right? But he, as you mentioned, he had been refused a job as a teacher. He rode the rails. While he rode the rails during the Great Depression, he was a boxer. He earned a living as a boxer because he had fought in college, right? He eventually came back. He worked for the State Department, the U.S. State Department for a while. Went to law school. Went to law school at a time, again, where not many minorities ever went to law school. This would have been in the 40s. And eventually made his way into politics. And so he incredible challenges even before running for governor.
When I remember when I first got started in political life, there might have been 6 Hispanic lawyers in this state, maybe 6. And now there's hundreds. So they set the tone for younger people to become interested in law.
Right. Theo, what was it that drove Governor Castro really into the life of public service? I mean, knowing that the odds were against him, what drove him into that?
Well, for me, it's kind of difficult because for me it was long distance. I lived in Flagstaff. He lived in Tucson, so a lot of the activity, what was happening in Tucson, we didn't know anything about. We knew that he was very important. People all over the state knew he was very important, but the inner workings of the political system in Tucson, we really didn't know. One day I got a call from Rose Mofford. Rose Mofford was not a governor. She was not even Secretary of State. She was an assistant to the Secretary of State. And she said, Theo, would you receive a call from Raul Castro if he calls you about his campaign? I said, yeah, sure, why not? And that's where it started. That's what my connection to the campaign started. That's the kind of people he had interested in him running for office.
You know, at some point, and I know we're kind of moving ahead, but I read that when Lyndon B. Johnson asked him to be ambassador, he was also asked to drop his last name.
Yeah, this is a famous story.
It's amazing.
This is a famous story. I mean, and basically he was asked by Senator Hayden at the time, Senator Carl Hayden,
okay.
Who was a senior senator.
You mean Carl Hayden?
Carl Hayden.
Oh, of the
Carl
high
Hayden.
school.
Who the school was named after. Senator Hayden came and was basically sent by Lyndon Johnson to ask him if he would become a U.S. ambassador to El Salvador, I think, at the time. But it came with a request that Governor Castro, could you please change your last name? And the reason was because Lyndon Johnson was afraid that he would be confused with Raul Castro, the brother of Fidel Castro, and they were, of course, infamous at the time.
And there was some
the Cuban Revolution.
some experience in Raul's honeymoon that we can relate to that
we can certainly talk
after
to
the break.
Right, absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
When we come back from the break, we'll talk about that. You're listening to 1190 AM, ARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. We'll be right back.
Welcome to AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. Educate. Celebrate. Connect. Arizona Hispanic Connection.
Thank you for staying with us. We will continue with the conversation. I just want to mention real fast. Remember the book, Adversity is My Angel. Remember the documentary, Two Cultures, Many Challenges. Remember the play, American Dreamer by James Garcia. There's also an institute called Raul H. Castro, and of course, parks and the Port of Douglas, named after him, and I'm sure other institutions. Amazing person. Can you briefly, James, tell us about the times that he was confused with the Castros of Cuba?
This is an unfortunate thing for the governor, is that he had this name, Raul Castro, and much of his life was contemporary with the Castro brothers of Cuba. And so there were a few occasions in which he was mistaken for the other Castro, and one of them was when he and his wife had gone to Mexico City on their honeymoon, and happened to check into the hotel where the Castro brothers were living, and apparently planning the revolution and recruiting people. And so, you're on your honeymoon, and people are knocking on your door and calling your room and saying, we're ready to join the revolution, and you're going, we're trying to enjoy our honeymoon, right? And they literally had to at one point had to check out of the hotel because they were just being bothered. There were a couple of other occasions he was not taken for an audience by the Vietnamese government once because they thought he was Raul Castro. During his campaign, there was an incident where a front page story was written about him when he was running. I think it was the first campaign, and there was a photograph of Fidel Castro that went with the story. And he suspects that probably wasn't a mistake because at the time the newspaper was not a friend of his. Wow. But so this happened again and again in the course of his life.
Theo, with the campaign itself, can you share some memories of the campaign itself and when he was governor?
A lot of people don't realize that there were two campaigns, and James just raised the issue of the first campaign. He ran against a very popular governor, Jack Williams, very popular, and he lost, barely lost to Jack. And 4 years later, he ran against another Williams, Russell Williams. And he had asked Tony Gavaldon and I to run his campaign in northern Arizona, and so we decided to do that. On election night in the campaign, we sent some people over to where the Republicans were celebrating, and they were celebrating because Russ Williams late in the night had a few thousand votes margin over Raul. They came back and they're calling Russ Williams Governor Williams, slapping him in the back and all that. They came and I asked, has the Navajo Nation and the White Mountain Apache Nation come in? No, not yet. We got it. We got it. In those days, they had to bring ballots in from these places. Some very isolated places. They came in and they swamped. They swamped Russ Williams. That's when he became governor. And as late as the black and white ball about 3 years ago, Castro was there. He credited the Navajo Nation for
He did routinely.
for having elected him.
He did routinely, yeah. I wonder if you could also speak to the fact, I think that what was extraordinary about the governor and his campaign, particularly the second one, was that he put together a coalition that had never been put together before. He ended up having Navajo support. He had Chicano Mexican-American support, but he also had Mormon support. And he did have Republican support in that sense. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, it was the Horatio Alger thing. You know, people saw this fellow that came across from Mexico and lived in all those dire circumstances and became governor. I mean, there were people just really, really working to help him get elected. But in the end, it took the Navajo vote to come in, and that's what did it.
Amazing, amazing. You know, if we can move a little bit back or forward to the fact that he was an ambassador, and one of the reasons that he only governed for 2 years was that Jimmy Carter asked him to be ambassador to Argentina, was it? So can you imagine being in the company of Carl Hayden, Jimmy Carter, Lyndon B. Johnson, Janet Napolitano,
Barry Goldwater. He was a contemporary.
Barry Goldwater, and many other. That's an amazing company to be in.
I think that's important to know about his U.S. ambassadorship, and I'd love to hear Theo's perspective on this. I think that the governor took great pride that he had become an American citizen, right? And he worked hard to do that. And I think also, even though he had great success, he constantly faced challenges, people sort of questioning on some level whether he was legitimately American. I mean, you know, there's always going to be there. We have that going on now, right? Mm-hmm. We have that going on now. Yeah. So that I think that when he was asked by Jimmy Carter, President Carter, to become a U.S. ambassador to Argentina, U.S. ambassadorships in Argentina were among the top tier ambassadorships, like Japan and England and so forth. And when he was asked, I believe that one of the reasons he said to himself, okay, you know, I love being governor. It's an important job, but why is this more important? Why should I do that? It was because the President of the United States had asked him to represent the United States of America. Wow. And there was no greater honor for the governor than to do that, to serve on behalf of this country overseas, representing who we were. Theo, I don't know what your thoughts are.
Well, it was a great honor for him to get elected, but in the state, a lot of people were very disappointed that he left after 2 years.
They were disappointed, yes.
Yes, they were very disappointed. They said we'll probably won't have that opportunity again for decades,
right?
Which
turned out to be true.
We have not had turned out to be true. And
I wanted to ask you, James. You and I had a conversation yesterday, and you mentioned that there's another gentleman in our state who has held one of the second top positions. That this belongs to the Arizona Hispanic leaders, and we will be highlighting more leaders. This is just the beginning. So who would that be, James?
So at the time that he was governor, of course, the Senate president was Alfredo Gutierrez. Right?
Yes.
Yeah, and this is so it was an extraordinary time if you think about it. I mean, this was 40-something years ago, and there were two Latinos in the single most powerful offices in the state, and Alfredo Gutierrez
at the same time.
At the same time, Alfredo Gutierrez was. But what's interesting is that stylistically, these were very different people. Right.
Their politics were completely opposite.
Yeah. I mean,
Raul Castro was fairly conservative, and Alfredo was a liberal. So they didn't see eye to eye in certain issues.
And stylistically, they also approached things in a different way. Governor Castro believed that you could work through the system, move up the ladder, and Alfredo Gutierrez was someone at the time who marched with Cesar Chavez and believed in, sort of sometimes taking to the streets.
James Steele, we have 3 minutes left for the show, but are we seeing a change in the demographics of legislators or the composition of legislators in the Senate here in the state of Arizona? Are we seeing more Latinos get
Yes.
involved?
Yes, we're seeing more. I hate to say this, but the leadership in those days was much stronger than what it is in the legislature today. And there's good legislators today. But in those days, with Alfredo and some of those other guys, Jaime Gutierrez, Pete Rios,
Yeah. Yeah. Because of time, Nacho, if you can hear us, final thoughts in 10, 15 seconds.
One of the things that my tío told me when we were on the road one time, he just couldn't believe that there yet to be another Hispanic county attorney elected in Pima County.
Yeah. Beth, if you can hear us, final thoughts, 10, 15 seconds. We're almost out of time.
Three words. Be a mentor.
Be a mentor.
Be a child's mentor. Always be a mentor.
All right. Thank you so much, Nacho and Beth, for joining us over the phone. Thank you. And James, final words?
Wow, there's so much to say about this man's life. I think my final thoughts are with him is that he created a legacy that in many ways has yet to be replicated, but we may be at the point where we're about to do that because the Latino community has grown substantially, because there are more Latinos engaged in politics, and there is. We're not going to get into sort of who the candidates are, but there is a Latino running for the first time running as governor and has a viable candidacy. And so, we're at a point, I think, where we're going to start to see Latino leadership rise to the top at the statewide level. And part of that is his legacy.
Thank you. Last words, Theo.
comparing leadership then and leadership now, I think the leadership was stronger then because they were in control. They were part of the Democratic Party that had control. Today, and for the last few years, the Democrats haven't had any power in the legislature.
Thank you. All right, we're just about out of time. Thank you so very much. The subject will be Arizona Hispanic professionals. We're going to be bringing some young people who have managed to graduate and have jobs just as examples. Alex, what a show today.
It is absolutely amazing and an honor to have Beth and Nacho and Tio, James. Thank you so much for joining. For those watching on Facebook Live, thank you very much. We apologize for the audio issues. We'll try to work on that. But again, have a great weekend. You're listening to 1190 AM, AARP, Arizona Hispanic Connection. Please go to our page, like our page, share it with your friends. Have a great weekend.
Arizona Hispanic Connection.